thoughtful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, and
All the countries are listening.
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us perhaps for the first time here for HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, we're here now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. on Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. As always, at the top of the hour, let me thank you for your thoughtful emails, calls, and text messages concerning previous shows we've aired here on HCC TV, but particularly your ideas for guest topics and subjects to be covered on upcoming segments of Dialogue Houston. For after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show here on HCC TV, proudly now in its 25th season, and we thank you for that, and we owe that to our wonderful viewing audience. We have a great show planned for you today because it is what? It is the end of summer. It is almost the beginning of August. There's a wonderful, magical thing that happens every April here in Houston, and we profile it as soon as we can get him on the air after the wonderful survey is done. That is the Houston Annual Area Survey done by none other than Dr. Stephen Klineberg and the Kinder Institute. And believe it or not, this is the 38th annual survey, started in 1982. That's right. And we're just happy and proud as always to have our friend and our buddy and the kind of the conscience of Houston in many ways that keeps us honest with the data in the survey, because we always like to say on this show, you're entitled to your own opinions, facts, and viewpoints, but you're not, your own opinion, perspective, and viewpoints, but you're not entitled to your own facts, because that's important, right?
Sure, and then the beauty of the surveys is that, don't yell at me, I just ask the questions here.
Exactly. Yeah. And I always tell them when I use your facts and that, your facts, I'm just a messenger,
yeah, hey.
You know? But it's important to have something like that as a kind of a third-party neutral arbitrator with the factual, so we can all talk on the same page and have the same data to be able to have an intelligent conversation.
Right, and the beauty of surveys is that they're transparent. Right. Here are the exact wording of the questions. Here's how we drew this sample. And the interviews are done by folks out of Pennsylvania, so right. They have no concept of what's happening in Houston. Identical questions being asked. You can watch the general public shifting in their understanding of these issues and ready to address some questions.
And as Houston grows and shifts and changes and grows and shifts again, from our diversity to our pluralism, to our tolerance, to our acceptance, to our inclusion. This is such a great city because it's the fourth largest, as you say.
Yeah, and I tell you, there's no other city that's been tracked in this way for this long, but no other city has undergone the kind of changes that Houston has during the same period. So it was a pure serendipity and really I think the most interesting and consequential city in America.
And as you said, the fourth largest international growing city, the most diverse city in America, also the city with the most gated communities in America. Yeah. So we have a lot of dichotomies here.
Big divisions by class, tremendous growing poverty at the same time.
Yeah. But that's part of urbanism, isn't it? When you really examine all the factors involved in urbanism, from the social, economic, and political realities, that's what makes the city vibrant. All those things that mix into you is what makes us a vibrant city.
Yeah, and the key, of course, is a new economy where the blue-collar jobs have disappeared. The big employers in Houston
talk about that, yes.
In the 70s was Hughes Tool Company, Cameron Iron Works. You could drop out of high school with a strong right arm, become a rustabout in the oil fields, and be able to make a middle-class wage. Those jobs are gone. And now education has become absolutely critical. And the challenge for Houston and Texas is that you didn't need education to make money in Texas, right? The big Texas fortunes were made from cotton, timber, cattle, sugar, oil. The source of wealth in the 21st century will have less to do with natural resources and more to do with human resources, with knowledge and skills. And we need to make those investments in a way that we're beginning to understand, but we have not yet found the political will to do it, to ensure that this next generation is prepared to succeed in the global knowledge economy of the 21st century.
And those skills and the jobs are there, and we need to prepare people for them, which is what HEC is all about, preparing that next generation. But it's very clear that we have a gap now between some of the jobs that need skills, certain skills, and the young people coming out of high school that don't have them. So we need to talk about that.
Skills deficit.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, something like 30% of everybody in Houston gets any education beyond high school. 8 and 9% of African-American Latino kids graduating from high schools, HISD high schools, pass the SAT at a level that indicates college readiness.
Wow.
So a whole bunch enroll in post-high school education programs. 55% enroll in one of those courses, only 22%, 11 years after starting 8th grade, get any kind of certificate in a world where 60% of the jobs will require a certificate of that sort.
Wow.
So that's the great question.
And the dropout rate is still unacceptable, hovering, depending who you talk to, honestly, about around still 50% in some schools.
You know, we were tracking 8th graders for 11 years.
Yep.
25% drop out before they graduate.
Okay, wow.
You drop out of high school and you don't have special skills as a artist or a special skills as an artist or a performer or an athlete.
Right.
And you just say, "Put me to work, America."
Right.
You're going to have trouble finding a job, and if you find a job, it will not pay you enough to support a family. The only way to improve the lot of the poor in the new economy of the 21st century is to invest in their skills.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we're beginning to understand that, but that's a big catch-up job.
It is. And HCC is kind of really aware of that, because a lot of the certificate programs they have now are actually at the end of that program, you can get a good job.
That's right.
Paying easily $50,000, $60,000.
Yes.
And so the question is, how do we match that? There's always that gap, as you mentioned, matching the availability
Right.
and the
And the business world has to work with the community colleges and with the high schools to make those pathways evident. And we all need to convince people, although I don't think it's as serious a problem as some people say, that not everybody needs 4 years of college, but everybody needs 1 or 2 years after high school. It's 12. It used to be 12 years of education. It's now 14 years as a minimum to be ready to function effectively in the 21st century.
And that's today. In the next couple of years, it may grow and change even more, that gap.
Well, we're going to be in a world of continual change, so that education that teaches you how to learn, how to solve problems, how to ask questions, all that is going to be critical. We're condemned, if that's the word, to lives of continual learning.
Now I have to if I get a great education and I have a job, I have to get to my job, my employment. Traffic for the 6th year in a row, we're strangling ourselves again, just like we did in the 80s.
It's a tremendous problem. We keep wanting to have more and more growth and more people moving into the city. You can't build enough roads to accommodate cars. You know, someone said that trying to solve your traffic problem by building more roads is like trying to deal with your weight problem by buying a bigger pair of pants.
Right, exactly.
It gives you a little bit of relief for a very short amount of time. We've got to find ways to help people move in mobility. We have to have alternatives to the automobile. We have to have safe ways to ride your bicycle and to walk. We need to. My colleague Bill Fulton always says that Houston is creating density without urbanism.
Wow.
Without urbanism. So you got more and more high rises and density, more and more people there, but there's no way to get around except by driving your car.
Right. And you can only, in concrete, can only do so much. And then, of course, the issue comes up because we are in Houston, the flooding. The flooding issue is something we're wrestling with, trying to get our hands on, get our arms around. But it's such a massive undertaking because we're playing catch up again, as we do so often in the city.
And it goes against the grain for Houston. Houston's DNA is free enterprise, minimum government, city built by, for, and on behalf of developers. Now being able to say, no, you cannot build in that floodplain. And and where you are now, you've got to raise those houses, or else the flooding is going to come back. And that ability to grow in a different way. Someone once said that it's not a question of alternatives to growth, but of alternative ways of growing.
Okay.
And how do we build a city that is more resilient, safer, greener, healthier, with another 1 million people? Only if we find ways to manage that growth. And that's a big challenge for Houston, because we convinced ourselves that our prosperity was because we were a free enterprise city with minimum government interference, showing what Americans can achieve when left unfettered by zoning, government regulation, excessive taxation, free enterprise America. Now having to come to grips with the complexities of a community living with each other in a finite space.
And now with global warming and green space emissions and all, we are green. We have a lot of green. We don't have enough green in the city, and we're working on that too.
Plant some more trees.
We're working on that too.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, I mean that's the irony. I mean, they're trying to summarize Houston. The jury is out. There's wonderful things happening. Not enough yet is happening across the board, and especially, of course, in education, but also on these other issues that you've been talking about.
And one of the interesting things about this year's survey was, because attitudes kind of grow, change, and morph in their own ways, our feelings around issues like abortion.
Yeah, or gay rights, which is just accelerated.
Right.
One of the phenomena of survey research has been this shift from back in 1991, we asked the question for the first time, are you in favor or opposed to allowing homosexual couples to legally adopt children? 11% were in favor. Then it went to 20%. and then 25,
Oh, wow.
30, 35, 45, 57% in the survey this year. Just striking, increasing recognition that this is part of the natural human variation, and I'm going to live in a world where not everybody's going to look like me or have the same proclivities as me, and that's increasingly okay. People say
That speaks well of the city, though.
whereas identical questions about abortion rights have not changed in 30 years.
Yeah.
But what is interesting there is that 60% say, I believe abortion is morally wrong, and 65% say, I'm opposed to a law that would make it more difficult for a woman to obtain an abortion. That ability to say, I believe it's wrong, but I know we live in a complex world, and it's a woman's body, and she has to have a right to make that decision herself. That's a powerful statement.
That is.
That says we're not a traditionalistic city, we're a progressive city. We're a city of tolerance, and a city that recognizes that what is right for me is not necessarily right for everybody else.
And the gay rights number is really astounding in some ways to have that growth and moving forward.
Yeah, just to watch that.
Watch that.
Have the same way.
We're going to pick up on other aspects of the survey. As you can tell, we got a lot to talk about. We never have enough time, but that's the way life is. So we're going to take a small pause and break. We'll come right back and we'll pick up our conversation with Dr. Klineberg. And you want to be with us for that second part because we're going to kind of do a little futuring, a little visioning about how Houston's future will be and become, because in a short 17 years, we'll celebrate our 200th anniversary, our bicentennial, 2036. And we've been asking a series of questions of the last couple of years. What is your number one aspirational goal for Houston by 2036? What is your number one aspirational goal for Houston by 2036? Then the second part of that question is, and how would you be acting and behaving today if you really wanted to see that happen? We'll be right back.
When I was growing up, my mom was extremely tidy. We were trained to put things back where we got them from. One day, when I walked into my mom's house, I felt like I walked to someone else's house. There was stuff everywhere. And just growing up the way I grew up and to see this transition was very alarming.
When Sean talked to me, it was a wake-up call, and that's when I went to the doctor.
The beauty of a longitudinal study, going from 1982 to now, 38 years, is you get to compare and contrast. You get to look at the graphs and the bars and the charts and the ups and downs, and you get to get a real feeling about how human beings think, feel, and in some cases, therefore, will act around a myriad of issues. As we grow into this wonderful diversity, into the next phase of hopefully understanding what it means to be a pluralistic city, beyond diversity, from beyond tolerance to acceptance, beyond inclusion to looking at equity, to all those things that we have to grow into yet. That's why I made the reference to the 17-year window to our 200th anniversary of the bicentennial of Houston in 2036. But Dr. Klineberg, who's our wonderful guest we'll be picking up at, so much of that will have to do with even our next piece we're going to look at, immigration, right? the feelings toward immigration, toward the growth of the city, which is partially driven by immigration.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is that when you ask these identical questions of random samples drawn exactly the same way in the same 3 weeks of February, with questions positioned as close as possible, exactly the same position in the question, you can watch people answer differently. You can also watch when it's the same or when it's gone in different. But we're a different folk today. Houston is a different place today than it was 10 years ago on a whole range of different questions of that sort. And immigration is a good example. The increasing embrace of diversity is really striking and powerful. Every question we ask, whether it's, do you think immigrants generally contribute more to the American economy than they take, or do they take more than they contribute? Do you think the increasing ethnic diversity in Houston will eventually become a source of great strength for the city or a growing problem? Should undocumented immigrants be granted legal citizenship? All those questions show this increasing support for the process it's undergoing. And the key predictor among Anglos on all of those questions about comfort with diversity, support for immigration, is age. Younger Anglos take for granted, what's the big deal here? This is what I love about America, that we older Anglos are struggling to accept. I always tell people, come be gentle with us older Anglos, but you can just watch that process unfold.
Right. And the change has to be, speaking of the age differences, it's part of it is the fear, part of it is the unknown, part of the changing demographics, part of it is the changing issue of struggle and power and all that stuff. The white privilege thing comes into play. All of that.
This large
just
can't happen without...
Just change. And that much change at the same time gets people really kind of say, well, what's my place? What's my role? How to react? How to respond?
I want my country back.
I want my country back. And that's a real sentiment. Understand that. And some of it is racially driven. Some of it is not. I've learned very clearly in talking to some people on the far west side of Houston, that phrase I've told you about, that those are not my children. That phrase, when I've heard it the first time and hear it now and then in different ways said, somewhat more now lately because of the political climate. But for many of those individuals who are espousing it, it's not mean-spirited, it's not racist, it's not ugly, it's just that there's a disconnect.
It's not my responsibility.
It's not my responsibility. You've given me no reason to be caring or involved in these children who are not my children. But yet we're part of America, we're part of citizenship, we're part of democracy, we're part of the caring nation that we say we are. And somewhere all that should matter, but sometimes it doesn't.
But I think the surveys do give a sense of optimism.
Yeah, it is very optimistic.
You can watch us changing.
Because young people are falling in love with each other all over the place. And they don't care about other diversity.
We sociologists don't like that. We want to put people into separate categories. And 28% of all married Latinos are married to non-Latinos.
Yeah.
1/3 of all marriages involving an Asian in the last 3 years involve a non-Asian. It's been an 800% increase in black-white marriages since
So romance is happening, but it's happening in the younger
that's
population.
Right. Well, and there's that law of human nature that says what I am familiar with feels right and natural, what I'm unfamiliar with feels unnatural and somehow. So even though we older Anglos are changing and accepting all of this, it's never going to feel quite as comfortable as for younger Anglos for whom this is their world.
As you grew up in Houston, you stayed in your conclaves, you stayed in your area, you faced PLMs.
PLUs.
People like me, people like us. People feel very comfortable with their own.
Sure.
The tribe feels very comfortable with its fellow tribe members. And beyond that, it gets very, very dicey sometimes.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's still a lot of segregation, but younger Anglos, nevertheless, even though they may not go to school with African American kids, have an acceptance that is still interesting. So it's a reminder that we live not only in where we are right now, but also in the world of media, in the world of music, and all kinds of things and then the most powerful thing of all, of course, is the relationship between ethnicity and age.
Yes.
It's not until you reach people aged 63 and older in all of Harris County that the majority of folks are Anglos. And at each younger age group, the percentage of Anglos plummets because the baby boom generation, 76 million babies born in that quarter century after World War II, 76 million of them leading edge turned 73 this year. There'll be a doubling in the number of Americans over the age of 65 in the next 25 years. They are overwhelmingly Anglo babies. And the young people are disproportionately non-Anglo. So when you look at all the people in Harris County, Texas, under the age of 20, the folks who will be the workers, citizens, taxpayers, voters of Houston in the 21st century, 51% are Latinos, 19% are African Americans, 9% are Asians, 22% of everybody under 20 is Anglo. So, wow, 70% of everybody under 20 is African American, Latino, the two groups overwhelmingly most likely be living in poverty.
Yeah.
We know what poverty does to your ability to succeed in the public schools. And your friends who say that not my
Right,
children.
right.
This is our future. It is a safe statement to make that if Houston's African American, Latino young people are unprepared to succeed in the global knowledge economy of the 21st century, it is difficult, if not impossible, to envision a prosperous future for Houston. So that's the story. That's the coming together of the two revolutions of our time, a new economy where education has become critical, and this remarkable demographic transformation, a shift from having been an amalgam of European nationalities into becoming a microcosm of the world.
Wow.
The first nation in the history of the world that can say we are a free people and we come from everywhere. And nowhere is that clearer than in Houston, Texas. So it's just a fascinating moment in American and world history, and Houston is at the center of where it's going to be.
So
happening.
self-interest and enlightened self-interest would say something like these young Latinos and African Americans, the workforce of today and tomorrow, will be the people putting into Social Security to take care of the aging Anglos.
Who's going to push my wheelchair?
Exactly. So, but those connections are important. Somehow, the different levels on different issues. We need to make those connections because again, I'm going to go back to the gentleman on the far west side of Houston. He said, "Then let's talk some more. Let's dialogue some more. Help me understand the connections. Help me give me a reason to care and to be connected." He said, "No one talks to us about these issues on my side of town. I don't hear it from my pastor on a place of worship, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, doesn't matter, church, parish, temple, synagogue, or mosque. I don't hear from the pulpit anybody talking about these issues or these children or the other side of town.
And I don't get to know them.
Or the other. We don't hear nothing about the other."
Yeah, right. Yeah, although I think there's more awareness now and more talking.
There's more awareness, but you got to go back to
But this is a very big city. Yeah.
You got to go back to the number one statistic still, that the worship hour is still the most segregated hour in America, and in Texas, and in Houston.
Right.
So the question becomes, as you said earlier, the message gets across, but it's getting limited where it can do it. Unless we go to school together, HISD is resegregated again.
Right.
Totally resegregated again, so it's not going to happen too much there. Happens in the workplace, if you're lucky. And now a lot of times those conversations are not allowed too much anymore in the workplace because everybody gets into their little tribal issues.
Their affinity groups.
Yep, the PLUs. So it's becoming more difficult to have a place where you can have some of these real conversations and dialogues. Of course, it's got to be done in a safe crucible that lifts everyone and holds everybody.
But you know better than anybody that there are wonderful organizations.
Oh yeah, we're trying to do it every day. You're doing it, I'm doing it, the Houston Public Library is doing it,
exactly.
the series of critical conversations. But I'm learning more and more how critical those are to have more of those.
That's right.
We need more places, more spaces.
Because it doesn't happen automatically.
It doesn't happen automatically.
Not just.
And you have to really work intentionality and mindfulness to create that wonderful, safe environment, that crucible where people feel very honored and respected to be able to talk and speak up and not attacked. So if we talk about those things, then let's talk about a little visioning. Here we go forward. You've been doing this for 38 years.
You're a very young man when we started.
You were a very young man. You're still a very young man. You've been with Book for a while, but the great book is coming out, believe it, not in 2020. It will be here in the spring of 2020. The book is here. We'll be talking more on future shows of Dialogue Houston about the book and the book signings, et cetera. But you have a unique perspective to talk about a little visioning now going forward in the future. Just put your crystal ball on. What do you see Houston being and becoming in this next 17-year journey toward 2036? What has to happen to have that kind of prosperous future for everyone?
So what's so interesting, I think, about predicting the future is that it's no longer a given in the way that our past was. I mean, you knew how you were doing in the 70s by the Hughes rig count.
Yeah.
And 82% of all the jobs in Houston were tied into the price of oil.
Yep.
Right? And you could buy a house in the 70s and it would quadruple in value in the next 5 years and you thought you were a genius.
Yeah.
Today, the future depends on us. It depends on the decisions that we collectively make. And so it's assessment of how much do Houstonians care? How much are those with power and influence and money willing to invest? How much do they care about this city and its future? And there's some good signs. I mean, this is a place that does care. The story of Houston, people came here reluctantly, yuck, the job is here, we'll go for a couple of years, and then decide they don't want to leave.
Right. We're going to put a pause there, and we'll pick it up in another, because we got a lot to want to talk about. But I want to tell everyone, here's the wonderful survey for this year. You can get it very simple at kinder.rice.edu.
Yep.
It's on their website. It is downloadable, as they say. And of course, the information has been on the screen and will be for Dr. Klineberg's contact if you want to follow up with him directly.
You bet.
But this year's particular version is very readable. It's kind of.
What do you mean? It wasn't readable before?
No, it's a different format in some ways. This one is. I've been reading them. Look, I've been reading them all, so I can say that. And so I want to make sure you avail yourselves of it. Dr. Klineberg, I want to thank you very much, as Steve, as always, for being our guest this week. We're going to continue this wonderful dialogue. I want to use these last few minutes I have quickly to talk about the passing of our good friend, of Steve's and mine. We both were there at the memorial service. And that is none other than our good friend, Ed Wolf. Mr. Houston, a true servant leader. I was privileged to be with Ed and get to know him in a really kind of different kind of way by being part of Class 11 of American Leadership Forum. We were each other's buddy. We held ropes going up the mountain for each other. And you start a great bond of a friendship that I can proudly say and happily say, because it really was a great joy to know him, that turned into a relationship. Relationships built on mutual trust and respect, because it's all about trust. Nothing happens without trust. I tried to sum up very quickly how to talk about Ed in the little time I have, and I'll go back to something that we did together in 2015, and he was the speaker at our servant leadership conference we do every year. And we talked about ing, the suffix ing, which is verbal, which is action. The three things that he most enjoyed, I think, and he would say this because he talked about it that day: organizing ing, coordinating ing, building consensus with people to make things happen. It's always about the action. To do, doing, and done. The only one of those that really mattered was, is it done? And Ed was very good at pulling people together, of getting consensus, of coordinating what needed to be done, of organizing people and giving them their tasks, of understanding you have to have the proper education, knowledge, and attitude to accomplish what you were doing. And we all need to be about doing that. And he was the true consummate person about community, because he understood the three things in life: family, community, and work. And those three things, I think, was he held out throughout his life. It's been a pleasure to know him, to work with him. His spirit lives on. We all have lessons that we can talk about, lessons learned from Ed Wolf. It was a joy to see the Houston community of all communities, all neighborhoods come together at his memorial service. And it's been a pleasure to be in that legion of the friends of Ed. I think Steve would say the same thing as we go forward. So I just wanted to make sure that I had a minute or two to talk about Ed in the closing of this week's Dialogue Houston. Got to get out of here. They tell me I'm out of time, so we're going to go. And we look forward to you joining us in future upcoming segments of Dialogue Houston. We're going to explore more and more the Houston psyche. How do we as human beings in Houston think, feel, and act around a myriad of issues? And what are we called to do personally in our commitment to each other? It is always about our commitment and service to the other. Until then, as always, peace, power, and love.